Right, this is Tom Platts of 3. Today I'll be answering a question. So first things first, we need to get an image that's usable as a reference. So I'll just warp the perspective here so we have something that looks a bit more flat and we can model against for the block out. Once we get into Maya, we'll make a free image plane and put that in one of the axes that we can model off. And we'll go into an orthographic view so we can just model straight on top of it. So to start with, I made a cube. I selected one of the faces that I'll be using, then I shift selected to invert the selection on everything else and delete the rest since we won't need it. And I just conform this plane around the blade, keeping adequate topology. Make a cut there so we can have a sharp edge later on. Extruding from a cylinder, we can quickly make the shape of the wood. And using some mirror, we can just interpolate and extrapolate what would be there, since we don't have it in the image. Just adjusting the blade now, so we can have a sharp edge on one side and the rest be smooth. Adding edge loops, or triple edging. You can ignore this part since it all gets destroyed and it doesn't look very good at all. But at least we made a recognizable shape by accident. Just getting some nice volume here on the blade still, so we have something to work with in Zbrush. So as soon as we get into Zbrush, first thing we do is destroy this horrible shape we've made by accident, and then slice the excess skin off. So here's a pretty cool trick. This is what I do for wood when I'm in a hurry. Just scaling the noise vertically quite a lot, and then using the levels. Here I go into sculpting some of the details before I apply the surface, and then once I've done that, I just apply the surface noise and apply a different size surface noise of the same effect. Pretty standard stuff for sculpting the blade. I don't do a particularly good job here since I didn't even know at this point what the blade was actually made out of. Turns out later I think I made it bone. I'll put a disclaimer here, I have no idea how to do this kind of low poly style cloth for games. I nearly got it right. I think I made it much too soft in the end. Just putting in little divots here. And then one of the most important things, just making sure everything conforms around each other so it looks more realistic. Here we're making the low poly just by dynameshing all of them together so we can have something easy to decimate. And as you can see, I've taken it down to about, here I think it's 260 quads, so that's just under 600 triangles, which is perfectly fine for something that doesn't deform. So I go back to the save I made of the high poly, and I'll just combine these three objects, making sure they're nice and high poly still. This part is for making an ID map, so I go into polygroups and I auto group them, so everything that's not welded becomes a different group. And then in the FBX exporter settings, I export each polygroup as a different material, which is used later on. Back in Maya, here's one of the more important steps. With the low poly, it's very important to make sure that a focal point of the model, such as the blade, remains nice and sharp and doesn't look low poly from the side view. This will be the only manual retopology we'll need to do since it's non-deforming. Very important thing to make sure of is that all the normals are soft. Every single one is soft for baking. I made extra sure that it would bake properly by adding an extra loop here, roughly just under 700 triangles now. Perfectly fine still. For UVing, I don't really care. You can find out how to do it properly elsewhere, but with this decimation method, this is just how I do it for a quick prop. This won't be used for any kind of production. Baking the maps in Substance, pretty straightforward. Make sure to bake the ID map with the material color we did earlier. I don't really have much to say about texturing at this point. It's kind of just look at the reference, try and make the model look a bit like the reference. One thing to make sure of while texturing this asset workflow in particular is to make sure nothing is set to UV projection. It's all triplanar or planar projection, since the UVs are not particularly good. Another disclaimer, I still have no idea how to do this style of low poly fabric rope cloth thing at this resolution, first person sort of. A good tip for getting more compelling looking textures is to make sure at least some aspects of it are hand painted. some roughness where your hands would be placed along this spear, the grease from the hands. Here we're just exporting the maps with the default settings, bringing it into Marmoset just for a demonstration. The displacement map didn't look too good. I still went with it. I'm not sure why. At this point, I'm just playing with my new GPU. Ray trace on. I don't have much to say about rendering. I'm really not particularly good at it. Marmoset's fun. Keyshot is fun. Marmoset's probably the easiest I know of. And there you have it. This is your game-ready PBR weapon. This took me about 1 hour and 10 minutes. Here's a little bonus. This is how it looks in Unity in a scene I made a few weeks ago. These assets, I've made a tutorial on how to make this style of asset as well. This whole room took me about 3 hours. Another one where you can just smash out assets very quickly with a simple technique. Link to that video in the description. Thanks for watching.